It gives me great pleasure tonight. How many have heard Dr. Micah Kubic before? All right. Well, you're in for another treat because he didn't come down in January as we first planned, but it was really a blizzard that weekend, so we rescheduled him for tonight. He was Executive Director of the Kansas ACLU from 2015 to 2019 as Executive Director of the ACLU, and I think we decided I met you in 2015 when he was here on campus speaking to a very small group. And at the end of that I thought, gosh, what a great speaker. And the next time he comes, I want him to have more people to talk to, so I'm really glad you came tonight. And I think you'll feel that way too. He took a trip to Florida and was their executive director for a few years, but he came back to Kansas in 2022, and he is now our executive director again of the ACLU. And I always look forward to his presentation. So please welcome Dr. Micah Kubic.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you. Those of you who have seen me before certainly know better, which is that when I extend the greeting, it is always your job to return it. So we will give everyone another chance. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Much better. Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here with you tonight. It's always a pleasure to be back in Hutch. I'm glad to see some familiar faces, some friends, and to see some new folks as well. I am always glad to come anytime Betty asks me to do anything. The answer is always yes, no matter what, because she is just so kind and warm and welcoming. I always feel at home when I come here, and she's a doer. If Betty tells you she's going to do something, she does it. She stands by her word, and I admire that so much. And so I'm glad to be here tonight. For those of you who don't know, the ACLU is a national nonprofit, a nonpartisan, non-political organization founded more than 100 years ago for one reason and one reason only. That is to defend the rights and freedoms that belong to every person under the Constitution of the United States. And it is especially important that we say now every person, because as you might have noticed, there's some folks running around the country pretending like the Constitution belongs to some people and not to everyone. I don't know if you have noticed, but there's a lot going on in the country. Things are a little wonky right now. I don't know if you picked up on it, but if not, we'll talk about it a little bit tonight. So we work on many issues at the ACLU of Kansas. We'll talk about a few this evening. So I was thinking a little bit on the way down here today what I wanted to say to you tonight. And some of you may remember that my father is from Louisiana, the Deep South, a place where storytelling is both an art and a pastime. And so it is often the case that when I am looking for wisdom, I turn to stories. So do you all want to hear a story tonight? All right. So here's the story that I thought of on the way down here. It's one I remember. So there was this father who was home over the weekend with his little girl. The mother was out of town, and so it was just the father and a little girl together spending the weekend together. And the father decided that he would cook them a meal at home rather than going out to eat. And he sent the little girl down to the basement to a little playroom she had down there to play while he cooked dinner. And so he turned on the stove and was getting to work, realized that he was missing a few things that he needed to make this meal. And so he decided to just go down the street to the little store and get what he needed. He turned the pot down. He called down to his daughter to tell her that he was going to get some things, and he left. And so he turned that pot down, but he forgot that there was a wash rag that was there on the stove. And so not too much after he left, that wash rag, it caught on fire. It fell to the floor. And soon before you knew it, the entire kitchen was a blazing inferno. Well, down in the basement, in the playroom, the little girl, she felt the heat coming through that door. She saw the smoke coming on under the door. She knew that she had to get out of there. So she looked around the basement trying to find how is she going to get out. She saw one of those little windows that are up high. But of course, she's just a little girl, so she couldn't quite reach. So she got a chair, scooted it over, stood on the chair, still couldn't quite reach. So she looked around the basement trying to find anything she could, and her eyes fell on a big, thick law book, a constitutional law book. So she put that on the chair, she climbed up on it, still couldn't reach. She looked around the room some more, found another big old book, this one about philosophy, about values and ethics and morals. She stacked that on top of the chair, on top of the law book, still couldn't reach. And so she looked around, and the last thing that was still there in that basement was a big stack of old yearbooks, not the little flimsy paper kind they have now either, those big, thick, leather-bound ones they used to make. So she put all of those stack of yearbooks on top of the philosophy book, on top of the law book, on top of the chair, and she could finally reach that window and scoot out of the basement, away from that fire, went to the neighbor's house, called the fire department, they came, and when her father finally got back from the store, he asked her, well, what? He sees all of this. He sees the fire department. He sees everything. He asked her, what happened? And she says, well, Daddy, we put the fire out. So where am I going with this? What's the point of this story? The first point is when Mom goes away, bad things happen. That's the first point. The second, more important point, though, is that if you want to put out a fire, the best way to do it is to stand on the law, to stand on values, and to stand on the power of people. It doesn't take just one, it takes all three if you want to put the fire out. You got to stand on the law, you got to stand on values, and you got to stand on the power of people. Just like that little girl stood on that constitutional law book, that philosophy book, and those yearbooks, the only way to put the fire out is to rely on all three of them, on law, on values, and on the power of people. Now, I don't know about you, maybe you see things differently, but I think we got some fires raging in the state of Kansas. Anybody feel differently? Anybody know that we got fires raging in this state? Donald Trump is the arsonist in chief, mind you. He can't take a step without setting a fire, not just in Kansas, not just in the country, but now all over the world. The man is setting fires everywhere he goes. And he's got a band of enablers, led especially by our own Attorney General, Chris Kubic. Okay, we got to try this again. Whenever I say Chris Kubic, what are you supposed to do? See, y'all learn quick. He's got a band of enablers led by Chris Kubic who are going around setting fires with him, who do everything they can to set our values on fire. They're trying to set voting rights on fire. They're trying to set justice on fire. They're trying to set freedom on fire. They're trying to set democracy itself on fire. And when they do that, our response has to be to stand on the law, to stand on values, and to stand on the power of people. Because when we do that, we succeed. Every time that we have done that in this state, in our history, when we have stood on those three things, we have prevailed. We did it back in the 1960s when we defeated loyalty oaths here in the state of Kansas by standing on the law, the First Amendment, by standing on values, our belief in freedom of expression, and standing on the power of people, everyday folks who challenged it. And we've done it in the decades since, culminating in 2022, when they brought forward this amendment to ban abortion in the state of Kansas, what did we do? We stood on the law, we stood on values, and we stood on the power of people, 59% of them, who gave them the tail kicking of a lifetime to show that that's not what we want here in Kansas. So we know that when we do these three things, we succeed, we prevail even against the odds, no matter what fires they set. So we know it works. And tonight we got three things where we really got to deploy this method in order to defend the things that we believe in. In order to defend a democracy that is under attack, we got to deploy them. I got three for you tonight. We're going to go in order of importance. So the first one that I want to mention to you, some of you have probably heard about, which is that our legislature passed a bill that forbids folks from making changes to their identity documents, to their birth certificates, to their driver's licenses, because they want to make people be who the legislators want them to be rather than who people actually are. So they have forbidden folks from making changes to their driver's license, to their birth certificates, and they want to regulate restroom use in the process too, because everyone has nothing better to do than monitor the toilets all day, every day. And so they passed this bill. They passed it because we had already challenged in court a previous version, and the courts had already said that this was illegal. We'd already stood on the law on values and on people to say that this sort of thing was nonsense. The courts had agreed. And so the legislature said, we are not content to follow the law. We are not content to observe values. We certainly don't want to hear what people have to say. And so we are going to pass through a new law right away. And what I think is particularly pernicious about this is that it is in so many respects representative of everything that we see in the Trump administration, in that it combines chaos and cruelty. They are not content simply to be cruel. They have to have chaotic cruelty, and they certainly never considered being kind but chaotic. No, it has to be chaos and cruelty at the same time. So when they said that those driver's license and identity documents couldn't be changed anymore, they also said the ones you've got are invalid, effective immediately. And did you know it's illegal in the state of Kansas to drive with an invalid license? So we're going to make hundreds of people become criminals right away through no action of their own, just because we want to be cruel, we want to be harmful, we want to create an environment of fear and harassment. So that's what they did. They did it. We sued the very next day at the ACLU of Kansas because we don't believe in waiting very long when there is something to do. And we are bringing forth that case in state court to say, again, the law says that we should treat people equally and that you have the freedom to be yourself. Our values say that we believe in equality. We believe in treating people fairly and not creating an environment of fear. And the power of people says that this is not what we want in this state, that this is not who we are or who we should be. And so we are going to challenge that. We're going to go all the way. We're going to pursue it until we make sure that human dignity itself is defended. They may be trying to set fire to human dignity, to the principle of equality, but we're not going to let them. We're going to stand on the law, on values, and on people, and we are going to prevail in that case as well. So that's the first one that I want to mention to you tonight. The second one that I want to mention to you this evening is voting rights, voting rights, voting rights. Democracy is under attack in the country. No one should have any illusions about that. Every day brings a fresh new attack on voting rights. Voting rights and democracy are not exactly the same thing, mind you. I make this point all the time. I'm going to make it again now. Democracy is the idea that everyone counts, that everyone is included, that everyone is in the community as part of something bigger than themselves. And the thing that unites all of these attacks we hear about is that they're all about kicking somebody out. They're all about excluding someone from the community rather than including them. And voting rights is one way that we access democracy, but it is not by itself democracy. That said, when they come for voting rights, it is not a coincidence that every time they do, it's about kicking somebody out, that it's about undermining the spirit of democracy. That is not a coincidence. And right now, here in the state of Kansas, we face more attacks on voting rights than we have in a generation. So right now, moving through the state legislature are at least 20 separate bills that attack the right to vote. They make it harder for people to register, harder to turn out and vote, harder to make that vote count. There's a bunch of them. I don't know whether they got like a machine, an AI thing where they just type in, how can we suppress the vote today? And it churns out new ideas for them. But the chair of the House Elections Committee in particular, a fella named Pat Proctor. If you don't know his name, I want you to remember it. Pat Proctor, Pat Proctor, Pat Proctor. The chair of the House Elections Committee is the guy who's moving almost all of these things single-handedly. And so we've got bills that make it harder for folks to vote by mail, harder for folks to do advance voting, period, that bring us back to the days of the documentary proof of citizenship requirement, the papers, please requirement that Chris Kubic had. He's got constitutional, thank you. See, some of y'all need to take a lesson. He got constitutional amendments that make it harder for folks to vote. We've got databases that are rife with error, that are designed to kick people off of the voter rolls. We've got one that says that if you don't vote in basically every election, you can get automatically kicked off the rolls for inactivity. Guess what? Most people don't vote in every election. Sometimes the candidates ain't all that exciting, and people don't turn out. You don't get kicked off the rolls just because you choose not to vote in any one given election. The point is that all of these things together, take any one of them independently, and it's a terrible thing. But take them as a package, and they represent the most serious attack on voting rights that we have seen in this state in a generation. And mind you, most of us lived through the Chris Kubic years, so we know what voter suppression looks like. This package would make him blush. It is that sinister, it is that serious, it is that advanced. This is a package that would make him blush. In fact, I say that it has gone beyond restrictions on voting rights. It's not just voter suppression anymore. It has become just plain anti-voting. It is against the very notion of voting. They should change the name to the House Anti-Elections Committee instead, because these are folks who are not on board with the very idea of participation in elections and democracy. They think it's a bad thing when people show up and participate rather than what we do, which is that democracy is strongest when more people are included. So we have our hands full in the legislature. And we have seen this show before. We've seen it before. Some of the ideas are new, but the underlying principle isn't. It doesn't change the fact that the federal Constitution and the state Constitution both say that voting is a right. That's the law. It doesn't change our values that we as Kansans say more people should participate rather than less, that we want to be engaged in the community together. And it certainly doesn't change the power of people, of the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who say this is not what we want, who stood against it before and are going to stand against it now. So even though some of these things may squeak by through the legislature, we still believe that some of them may get vetoed by the governor and not become law. And even those that do become law, well, they're going to run up against that grinder of the law, values, and people. And so we are going to challenge those in every way we can until we make sure that our democracy is strong here and we put this particular fire out. That's the second one. The third one I want to mention to you tonight. So usually when you give a speech, you save the most important one for last because it's the one that people will remember. That's what we're doing tonight, too. So the most important one, I don't care what issue is most important to you. I don't care whether your pet issue, the thing that you care about most, is voting rights. There is one single most important thing to do in Kansas in 2026. I don't care if abortion access is the most important issue to you. There is one single most important thing to do. I don't care if LGBTQ plus equality is your issue. There is one single most important thing to do. I don't care if immigrants' rights are your thing. There is one single most important thing to do. I don't care if access to justice or the separation of powers or independence or transparency or democracy itself is your thing. There is one single most important thing to do. You get it? It's important. Everyone's clear. It's important. All right. So the one single most important thing to do in Kansas, and in fact in the entire country in the year 2026, is to defeat this constitutional amendment that's coming up in August. So this is the constitutional amendment that says we are going to get rid of our merit-based fair, and impartial system of selecting state Supreme Court justices. And instead, we're going to embrace a partisan, elected, partial, and unfair court instead. Now, here's the thing that is important to know about this. This is not a technocratic, bureaucratic, boring thing. When I say to folks, well, let us talk about the Judicial Selection Amendment and dispensing with the merit-based system of qualifications for judges on our state, people fall asleep. You fell asleep just as I was saying it. That's not what it's really about, though. To think that it is about that is a mistake, is an error. What it is really about is who we are as a state, what our values are as a state, who we want to be, who we don't want to be. This is not just a referendum on how we select justices. This is a referendum on the progress of the 21st century and the 20th century and all the ones before. Because the folks who are behind this, they don't care about judicial selection either. They don't care about how the justices are selected. What they care about are the outcomes that are produced. And they don't like that a fair and impartial court sometimes, occasionally, from time to time, produces outcomes that they don't like. Now, mind you, I work at the ACLU. My job is to criticize every single thing, every day, everywhere, every place. Everything. Everything. Right? So don't get it twisted and believe for a moment that I believe that the Kansas Supreme Court is perfect, that every single thing they have ever done is right. There are outcomes, there are decisions they have handed down that I strongly disagree with. We go there a lot at the ACLU of Kansas. Sometimes we prevail, sometimes we do not. Sometimes the court gets it right, sometimes they get it wrong. We at the ACLU always get it right, of course. But sometimes the court gets it wrong. That's okay. That's what happens in a mature democracy where people care about the law, about values, and about people. Sometimes there are disagreements. But what the folks who are behind this amendment want is not to have any of that uncertainty. They don't want it to be a fair and impartial process. They want it to be so politicized and so sure that they can go in there and be absolutely certain that the most extreme, most anti-democratic, most anti-freedom, most anti-justice, most anti-equality garbage that the legislature can dream up will automatically be validated and ratified and verified by the Kansas Supreme Court. And that's not what actually happens in a fair and impartial system. In a fair and impartial system, you have a court that rules against Governor Kelly on grounds of religious freedom, but also a court that rules against Governor Brownback. Remember him? Brownback, see, I didn't even have to tell you that time. Sam Brownback on school funding. It says, yes, actually public schools should exist in the state of Kansas. Actually, we're quite proud of them, thank you very much. A fair and impartial court is the one that says that the state constitution has a right to bodily autonomy, that you get to make decisions for yourself, including healthcare decisions like abortion. The state Supreme Court is the one that said first that abortion is protected in this state and we have a right to access it. And the legislature didn't like that, which is why they brought you that amendment in 2022. It was specifically because they were trying to get around the court. And so when we told them no, they were not self-reflective people. They did not go and sit in a corner and say, well, perhaps we were mistaken. Let us reconsider whether people want this or not. Instead, they came back with this new amendment instead as a way of still getting the outcomes that they want. And what they want is, again, not a fair and impartial court, but rather one that is bought and paid for. Bought and paid for by out-of-state billionaires. Because that's what happens when you have statewide partisan elections, which is what this constitutional amendment would bring us. It would get rid of the merit-based system we have had for 70 years that was a response to rampant corruption, and bring that rampant corruption right back. It looks at that corruption and says, gee, that sounds like a great idea. Let us be as corrupt as possible. And so it would open the door to hundreds of millions of outside spending, because that's what happens in states that have partisan elections for Supreme Court like this. We know that because just a few months ago they had one in Wisconsin where $100 million poured in for one seat on the Kansas State Supreme Court. We got 7 of them here. $700 million. That's a lot of TV ads. Y'all want to see all those ads? Y'all want to see a lot more of Elon Musk? You feel like he's absent in your life and you really need him present? Right? That's what happens in these sorts of setups. That's what happens. The courts cease to become fair and impartial, but instead are bought and paid for by billionaires. Now, I don't know about you. Maybe you have a closer relationship with these folks than I do. But I don't really think that Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and all the rest are really thinking about us. I don't think that when they decide to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, they're thinking about what is in our best interests. And so when they spend that money on the court, it's not to deliver fair and impartial outcomes that will benefit us. It's to deliver unfair and partial outcomes that benefit people like them. All of the outcomes across the board are in danger if we do this. You don't have to love the current court. You don't have to think the current setup is perfect. I happen to think it's pretty good. It's a merit-based system that rewards folks for judicial temperament and having demonstrated some knowledge of the law. They go through a process. They get selected through this commission, and 3 names go to the governor. The governor then appoints one of those people. And then at the very next election, that person has to come before you, the voters, to be either elected or sent home. So I think the system that we have now is actually pretty good, if not perfect, and is certainly an improvement over a statewide partisan election that will be bought and paid for by outside billionaires and result in fairly immediately a ban on abortion, elimination, evisceration of our public schools, elimination of any protections for voting rights in the state constitution, guarantee that there is no LGBTQ plus equality interpreted in the state constitution. Checks and balances go out the window, transparency goes out the window, democracy goes out the window. That sounds to me like a pretty raw deal. The good news, though, is that we can do something about it. Because this is one where it's a constitutional amendment, which means who gets to vote on it? You do. All of us do. And so our job between now and August is to make sure that every single soul you know knows about this amendment, knows just a little something about the Kansas State Supreme Court. Let's just start with making sure people know it exists. That would be a great start. Let's let people know the court exists, that is fair and impartial. That's a great second place to go. But let's make sure people understand the stakes of this election. And we know that when we do that, when we stand on the law here, which is the Constitution, what we believe in, and we stand on our values, that fairness and impartiality matter, that having a court that stands up for our interests matters, and we stand on the power of people, that is all the voters, we know that we can prevail. We know that because we did it in 2022. We showed them conclusively that standing on the law, on values, and on the power of people can put that fire out, and so we can do it again. Our job between now and August is to make sure people know about this and that they know the stakes. Because if they think that it's just a technical argle-bargle jargon thing, they're going to stay their tails at home, and we're going to get a bad outcome. But if they understand the stakes, if they understand what is really in play here, we absolutely can win this thing and make sure that we defend all of those issues. No matter which issue is yours, all of them we can defend, not just now, not just 2026, but beyond. Because that's why this is so important. This is more important than any candidate race. I know candidates are important. Don't go and tell them that Micah said that they don't matter. That's not what I'm saying. But this is more important than any candidate race. It is more important than anything else happening here. Because this election, this constitutional amendment, is not just about 2026. It's also about 2036 and 2046 and 2056 and 2066 and beyond. It is the thing that will set the tone for generations here in Kansas. So they have started this fire. They have started a fire. Let us be clear, Chris Kobach's the one who did it. You can be sure any fire that is started in Kansas, he was right there with a lighter. Chris Kobach is the one who started this fire. But we're going to put this fire out. No matter what issue it is, whether it's that transgender rights issue that I mentioned at the beginning, whether it's voting rights, or whether it's this constitutional amendment, there are a lot of fires being set in Kansas and around this country. But what we know for sure is that together we can put this fire out. All it takes is for us to do the same thing that we have done before, the ways that we have prevailed before. The reason to be hopeful is not that they set in fires. The reason to be hopeful is that we know how to put the fire out. And we know how to put the fire out the same way that little girl in that basement did. We're going to put the fire out by standing on the law, standing on values, and standing on the power of people. And when we do those three things, then mark my words, we're going to put this fire out. All right. Got time for questions? We have time for questions, right? Do we have time for questions? Do we have time for questions?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's do questions. This one? Okay.
You all wait till I get to you with the microphone. Got that? Over here. Now come over there. Don't you start without the microphone.
Who is Pat Proctor? Is he an elected official or appointed?
So Pat Proctor is a member of the state legislature. He's a state representative elected by the people of Leavenworth County. So he lives over in Leavenworth. And he is also the chair of the House Elections Committee. He is running for statewide office this year. A suspicious and cynical mind might suggest that just maybe his entire agenda of anti-voting bills is tied to his desire for fame in that statewide election. But I am not a cynical and suspicious mind, so I would not suggest such a thing.
I had a question about this feels, it's a little different than 2022 and that this feels a little cloudier, even though I know the end result isn't, because that was a clear-cut vote, yes or no, and people understood exactly what it was after they figured out what value the vote meant. Is there a way, or in your head, to wait to uncloud that? Like, this is really good. Is there something on that, or does it just depend on the person? Like, what's your issue, and that's how you have to approach it?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out a way to boil that down. Yeah.
Right. So it's a great question, right? So I think, in 2022, the architects of that amendment thought that they were being clever, right? They thought they were being tricky because they made the language pretty muddled, right? It didn't really work. People caught on to it pretty quick, right? They figured out that it was an abortion ban. They figured that out. So this time around, the architects of the amendment, I think, have learned a lesson. I didn't really think they were capable of it, but they did. They learned. And so what they learned was to make the language itself very, very clear. It is very, very clear what it does. The outcome, the impact is the thing that is unclear now, right? And so that's the thing that we have to grope with together. I think the answer to that is partly what's contained there, right? Which is that talking to people about the fairness and impartiality of the system is really important. Making sure that people know just a little bit about the basics of our current system is really, really important. Reminding folks that we think that judges should be judges and not politicians is important. They are two different job descriptions for a reason. Making them the same job is a problem. So doing all of that is important. And the other thing that is important is for you to know Leo. Raise your hand, Leo. So Leo is the campaign manager for the Vote No campaign for Kansas United for Impartial Courts. And the campaign right now is in the process of really narrowing down exactly how we need to talk about this. Like, what is the thing that really matters to folks? How do we really hit home the stakes? We know that it's all of those things, and there's still more to come. There will be more to come, and Leo is the person who's going to get it to you. Because he's the one who's working with the network of organizations around the state to make sure that folks have information about the message, have information about what our research shows. As hard as it is to believe, We still early. I know it doesn't feel that way, right? Because it's March and the election is in August. I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it. I'm sure you do too. But most people in Kansas do not, right? Most people in Kansas don't even know we have an election in August. Many people don't know there's a Kansas State Supreme Court. So many people are not even thinking about this yet. We want to make sure that when they do start thinking about it come June, July, August, that we have something for them then. And so we'll have even more answers for you between now and then. But in the meantime, fair and impartial, judges, not politicians. Make sure people know the stakes are not just this sort of technical change. It's all those issues I mentioned. Thank you.
In our merit-based system, the commission is made up of what type of people and how do they get there?
Yeah. So in the merit-based system that we have now, the Judicial Nominating Commission is made up of 9 people. About half of them are elected by members of the Kansas Bar Association, so lawyers. They elect amongst themselves some members because they're the ones who interact with the bar, who know a little bit about folks, who are able to assess those sorts of things. Many of those folks are not even practicing lawyers anymore. Sometimes they're former Supreme Court justices. They're legal scholars, but they're elected by the bar. The other half of the commission is appointed by whoever the governor is on that particular day, right? So it goes back and forth based on who the governor is. Those 9 people come together. The governor's appointees are normally community members. They're designed to make sure that the community itself has a voice and that it's not only lawyers who are participating in this process that affects all of us. And all of these folks have to come from across the state. So there's 2 members from each of the congressional districts by congressional district. Under this other proposal, right, under the statewide elected, you're going to have statewide elections. I can guarantee you that there are huge swaths of the state that will never see the inside of the Supreme Court chamber ever again. Whereas right now, because of the way it's constituted, you make sure that there's some geographic diversity, diversity of experience that you're not going to get in a Johnson County-dominated statewide process. Those 9 people come together. They review applications when there is an opening. The whole thing happens out in public. So they stream it live on the internet. You can go and sit in the conference room in Topeka and watch the thing. They have discussions amongst themselves. They talk about the candidates. All of the application materials are open. Even when they say something unkind about one of the candidates, they have to say it in public. They don't get to say it in a closed-door session. The criticisms that they have of candidates are a matter of public record. And then they send 3 names to the governor. The governor picks 1, right? So at every step, the process is designed to be maximally transparent and inclusive. And of course, that's why they want to get rid of it.
Yes, back to Mr. Proctor.
Pat Proctor, Pat Proctor, Pat Proctor. Everybody's going to leave here tonight remembering that.
I'm just running for one statewide office. It's Secretary of State, S.S.N. Rawhead, if that's how you pronounce his name. Is this possibly the most important Secretary of State election that Kansas has had in recent time because they didn't screw with the vote?
Yeah, so I think it's a very important election. I think the Secretary of State has enormous power over the way elections are administered in the state. And so the fact that Pat Proctor is hostile to voting rights, I think is very, very something that folks should be mindful of, aware of. I think he has pledged to implement the most extreme form of all of his agenda if he is elected. And so folks should take note of that. And if that's something that they support, then they should take action according. And if they have problems with that, they should take action according to that too, right? It is a momentous election. It is an important candidate election. Certainly the most important Secretary of State's race we've had in a while. Right now we have Scott Schwab, who I disagree with on many issues, but who I will also give credit where it is due, which is to say that he has repeatedly stood up for the integrity of our elections, has repeatedly said that fraud is not a problem, and has repeatedly pushed back against some of the most extreme restrictions. Chairman Proctor has certainly not done that, and so people should be mindful of it. Very important, and still less important than the constitutional amendment.
It's my understanding that this Kansas methodology is somewhat envied by other states. Are you expecting to get any assistance from other states to hold Kansas up as a leader in this election of judges?
Yeah, so I think one reason that I say this is important, not just in Kansas in 2026, but nationwide, is that I think you should absolutely expect to see similar attacks on courts all over this country if this succeeds. And that is especially important now because we all know what's happening with the federal judiciary, right? We all see what is happening with the U.S. Supreme Court. We all see the way that the Trump administration has been stacking federal courts up and down the land. And for that reason, many civil rights issues, many civil liberties issues, many freedom issues are going to state Supreme Courts rather than to federal court. People are using state constitutions which have a different overlapping set of rights than the federal constitution to protect themselves from assault, from abuse on democracy. So we at the ACLU and other partners, we're all going to state Supreme Courts a lot more than we used to. And so that's part of what's going on here too. They're attacking the court, the state Supreme Court, because it is a lever to pull, and it's a lever that we are using in this environment. So it's important for the national discussion because if it succeeds here, it's going to go to every other merit-based system court in the land. And there are a bunch of them because ever since Kansas moved to this system back in the 1950s, a bunch of other states joined us. A bunch of other states left behind that old, corrupt, partisan election system and went to a merit-based system instead. Not one single solitary state has gone the other direction, though. Not one single solitary state has gone from partisan election, or has gone from a merit-based system back to partisan elections. Most people aren't too keen to go back in time, actually. And so we would be the first there. All of that means that this is, in fact, a national issue. It is, in fact, something that matters to people around this country. It matters to people who care about freedom and democracy and equality. And it matters to Donald Trump, too, which is why when it was up in the legislature, they got the last vote they needed to bring it before you by having the president call in on a conference call and lobby the last vote to put it on the ballot. Right? That tells you the stakes right there by itself. Donald Trump thinks it is so important to his agenda to make sure that we get rid of fair and impartial courts in Kansas that he spent a little time on it.
Any other questions? Okay. Two-part question.
You're going to have to help me keep track of the parts.
Yes.
Okay.
So does the amendment just have to barely pass, or does it have to pass by a certain majority? And if the world, is coming to an end and it does pass, the amendment is accepted, is there recourse after that for us?
So I will be able to keep track of this. The first one, yes, it only takes 50% plus one, right? It's a yes or no thing. There's no, I'm uncertain. There's no check back with me tomorrow, right? It's a straight yes or no, which means it only takes 50% plus one under our system. We are not like the dreaded state of Florida, where it takes a 60% majority in order for these things to pass. So for example, this last time in Florida, they had an abortion amendment. It got 56% of the vote to defend abortion access in Florida. It still failed because you got to get 60% there. We are not like Florida. Let us all thank our lucky stars for that. In this particular case, right, though, it does just take 50% plus one, which means that's all we have to do. Vote no only has to get 50% plus one. I would personally love to get more than 59% like we did last time, right? Like, I would love to give an even more resounding vote of defiance to these folks, but all it takes is 50% plus one. Tell everyone you know. It's not going to pass. It's not going to pass. We're not going to let it pass. We're going to do our work between now and then to make sure that it does not pass. Because if it does, the situation is one that we are really going to have to deal with. It's not something that you can undo other than by yet another constitutional amendment. And keep in mind, here in Kansas, we're not like some other states where the voters themselves get to propose constitutional amendments. No, only the legislature can propose constitutional amendments, which is why we always say vote no. because we know that anything that the legislature would propose is going to be a no. They haven't come up with a constitutional amendment yet where we were like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Always no. The only way to address that would be through yet another constitutional amendment, which means that we will have to find other ways to protect freedom and democracy and equality in Kansas. We will do that because we are a resilient people, but we will have to fight back against a cabal of folks who are trying to instill authoritarianism, creeping authoritarianism on us, folks who are determined to have just a small group of people make all the decisions that undermine abortion access and voting rights and all the rest. We're going to have to deal with a small group of authoritarians like they have in Iran or Myanmar or Missouri. Nobody wants to be Missouri, right? So. Who else?
How many merit-based systems are there? How many states?
Yeah. So there's a roughly equal number of states that have direct elections and merit-based systems. There are a handful of states that have just a sort of federal system where the governor rather nominates members and then they're ratified by the state Senate. There's one state, South Carolina, where the legislature itself selects the Supreme Court justices. That one, I think, is the worst possible idea. But about half and half are roughly equal numbers of election versus merit-based system. But even within the election model, about half of them do partisan elections and about half do nonpartisan elections. So when you narrow it down, there's maybe 10, 11 states in the country that have a system like the one that is being proposed under the constitutional amendment, and 15, 18, something like that, in the merit-based system model. Again, all of the ones that have more recent changes, more recent state constitutions have merit-based systems. All of the ones that have elective models have them from a long time ago and have not changed.
Would there be any usefulness in our expressing our displeasure to any Reno County or other state legislators on this constitutional amendment, or has the gate closed?
So the gate hasn't closed until you vote in August, right? So that's the biggest, best, most effective way to express your displeasure is by voting no. At the same time, I will always encourage you to be in conversation and respectful, civil dialogue with your elected officials to tell them that you disagree with the things that they have done. There's no undoing it, right? We can't take it off the ballot at this point. There's nothing that the legislature can do to say cooler heads have prevailed. But I absolutely encourage folks to let elected officials know that this is not something they're on board with, both in direct conversation to stop them from doing something even worse in the future, and the most effective, most impactful way that they will get the message clearer than any other is by voting no in August and giving them a solid shellacking there.
I believe you said that once they were elected, at post 1 year, they're on the ballot for retention. So that invites some partisanship. But if they are not retained, then it just starts back in the same merit-based system again. Am I correct?
Yeah, so it's at the very next election, so the very next general election after their appointment is when they're up for retention or non-retention. It's a straight yes or no vote. I would say that our system does very good at controlling for partisanship. So the state constitution, for example, says that state Supreme Court justices cannot engage in partisan politics. They cannot be a member of a county party committee. They cannot be a member of the state party committee, right? They cannot have any partisan affiliation whatsoever. And that shows up in the retention elections too. This would get rid of that, right? Like this constitutional amendment would not only have folks running in partisan elections, but invite a world where they are very active in party politics itself. So I don't think there's really partisanship in the retention elections as they stand now. Most of them have been retained. And then every couple of years after that, so after the first election, they have to come up before the voters again. It's not one of those things where they're there forever. They have to come before the voters periodically to be retained or non-retained. And then there's more, right? Like it's like they say on the late night TV ads, wait, there's more. We also have a mandatory retirement age for Supreme Court justices in Kansas. It is not like the United States Supreme Court, where they hang on until past skeletal, right? Like they in the crypt and they still casting votes at the U.S. Supreme Court. No, here we have a mandatory retirement age where folks have to step away. In each of those cases, whether someone steps away because of the retirement age, just because they resigned for other reasons, or if they were removed, yes, the answer is that it starts the process all over again. So right now, we have a Supreme Court justice who is stepping down on March 28th. The former Chief Justice of the court had some health issues. She stepped away from the Chief Justiceship, but stayed on just a little while longer as a judge to get through some of the term. And then she's resigning March 28th. And so the process is open now to select her replacement.
Have we ever had a judge being voted out?
So not at the state Supreme Court level. There has not been anyone who was not retained, but there have been there have been several very robust efforts to get rid of the justices. And let's be clear, we are doing this amendment now in part because the voters retained justices that they didn't like, right? Because they targeted justices in the past who had ruled in favor of school funding in particular and abortion secondarily. And because the voters themselves said, no, we want to keep those justices, we think that they are fair and impartial, that's part of how we got here. There was a very well-funded effort in 2016 by the Sam Brownback machine to get rid of a few of these justices in particular who had ruled against him. And that is the seeds of all of this, right? The seeds of this amendment aren't even abortion, although that is a big part of it. That's not the first seed of it. The first seed of it is the school funding fights from the Brownback experiment from 2014, 2015, and 2016, when the court ruled against the governor. The governor tried to defeat people, spent more than $10 million to do so. The voters said, no, actually, we think they're doing a pretty good job. And so that's what brought us here.
Where is the legal profession coming down on this? The Kansas Bar Association, can they take a public position on it? And should we expect to hear from them?
So the Kansas legal community is a very active member of our coalition, of the campaign that is mobilized against this. We have Kansas United for Impartial Courts, QUIC. That's the campaign that Leo is the campaign manager of. The Kansas legal community is part of that effort, a very active, very involved, very engaged part. The Kansas Bar Association testified against this, took an active position against it when it was in the legislature, and the legal groups as a whole have largely come out against it. Are there some individual lawyers who have different, you get 10 lawyers in a room, you get 37 different opinions, right? Is there some disagreement? Yeah, but I would say on the whole, the Kansas legal community is very strongly in favor of the current system because it is one that they believe they get a fair shake and their clients get a fair shake, right? No one wants to go into a courtroom feeling like the decision has already been made before they even showed up. And so even attorneys who don't like members of the court, who don't like certain outcomes, they believe that they get a fair shake and that the decision is made based on what happens in court, not outside of court, and that has led them to be very active opponents of the amendment.
So we want as many people registered to vote as possible.
We do. Pat Proctor doesn't.
Yeah, and that's my question is we try to encourage people to register to vote. I feel like it's fuzzy as to how they go about that now, and will there be like a drop dead date with some clarification from someplace like the ACLU? Will help us?
Yes, so there is absolutely a date certain where voter registration has to happen in Kansas. It's Betty says there's information over here on the table that has those dates on it. Folks should absolutely register before that. I think it's in July. I think it's July 7th or something like that. The poster said. And there's registration forms over there. But yes, we have detailed information about this. We will do it again before then. The ACLU runs a statewide election protection program in Kansas as well that makes sure that people get accurate information about voting and have someone to call on election day if they have problems, right? So it's not just registration, it's making sure that your registration is honored. It's making sure that there's not harassment at the polls. It's making sure that all of the issues happen, right? So we will be doing all of that. The other thing that I will say about this election that is really important, mail voting is really popular in Kansas, right? Mail-in voting, advance voting, really popular, has grown in popularity in recent years for a lot of good reasons. Let us remember that the Kansas legislature got rid of the mail processing window that existed before for mail-in ballots. They call it the grace period. I don't call it that. I call it the mail processing window because they don't extend grace. Having your right to vote observed is not grace, it's a right. It's not a grace period. It's a mail processing window. It said before you have some time after the election for the post office to get your ballot to the election office. They got rid of that because they don't want to count the ballots, right? They don't want to count the votes. So if people are going to use mail-in ballots, and I always say, vote in whatever way makes sense for you. You don't get extra points by showing up in person versus putting it in the mail, right? Your vote doesn't count more. Do whatever works for you. But if you are going to mail in your ballot, do it literally the moment you get it. Don't do what a lot of people historically have done, which is wait till the weekend before, sit at the kitchen table, fill it in, think about it. Like, it's too late then because they got rid of the window and the post office is really slow. I got a Christmas card last week. Right? The mail is slow. So don't rely on it, but make sure you do it at the very beginning. And it's important that we make sure that that message gets out too, because folks have been using mail-in votes so much more. We want to make sure that those thousands and thousands and thousands of ballots get counted. Who else?
Me. I know we're going to do our best to defeat this amendment.
No, we are going to defeat this, right? Yes. We're going to say it together. We are going to defeat this amendment. Yeah, that was a little ragtag. We'll try again in a little bit.
But at the same time, should we not research the people, the legislators that voted for this amendment to be put on the ballot and realize that we will not see changes in Topeka until the seats are changed in those seats?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fair to say that the folks who brought you this amendment have a particular point of view that embraces extremism, that is about adopting an extreme agenda, and we have to take action on that front too. When I say that the amendment is the most important, that doesn't mean it's the only thing. It is merely a matter of what is the thing that most allows us to be able to take action on those things in the future. It is protecting the fairness and impartiality of the court, right? Because if the court is not fair and impartial, ain't nobody going to get to vote, right? You won't be able to take action. Like if we're suppressing huge portions of the vote, we're not going to be able to use the other levers to hold folks accountable. But we absolutely have to do that too, even now. Even now, yes.
Even then.
Yes, even then, no matter what happens with the amendment, the same way that when we won in 2022, it did not mean that abortion was protected for all time. It did not mean that the issue was definitively resolved. It should have meant that. That's what y'all said, right? That's what it should have meant. That's not what it meant. What it meant instead is that freedom is a constant struggle. And so we're going to be in that struggle for a long time. We're going to win that struggle at every step of the way, but it's going to keep on being a constant struggle. It's going to be a struggle for them too, because losing is a struggle.
Well, I'll ask my second question first.
Okay.
Prime Masterson running for governor. If he win, I shouldn't say if, so when he loses his election, he has also lost his representative seat.
No, he is a member of the state Senate, and their terms are on a 4-year thing. So he will be he will be, if he chooses to remain in the state Senate, if he loses it, he will, yeah.
Then, I can't remember my first question. It's gone.
So our oldest hasn't changed their gender marker, but they are speaking with a lawyer concerning a name change. Is that a bad time right now before voting starts? Do they need to wait until really important elections are over before they do that? Or is it just a flag, another red flag for not being able to vote?
But the gender marker on the identity documents has not been changed prior and is not. Okay. So I mean, I think name changes are a thing that happens all the time. People change their names for lots of reasons. I would say make sure that all of the documentation of that process is there so that if there are questions about voter registration or things like that, that they can be resolved. But name changes are something that people do all the time for all sorts of reasons that should not impact the ability to vote. At the same time, always have your paperwork, always have your documentation, because should does not always equal the real world, right? But there should not be anything that stops that. For right now, there are no gender marker changes happening. We asked for a temporary restraining order from the court. The court did not grant that, but that does not mean that we are not still pursuing legal avenues. They'll just take a little while longer. It is a very difficult, a very fraught time. It is a very scary time for a lot of people in the state. We should acknowledge that. And we should acknowledge that the creation of that scary time is in fact the point.
Hang on, you're allowed. No, you're not. You're not allowed.
I think one thing that's really happened is the false information that's started scaring women to death about the fact that they're going to have to bring in their marriage certificates and stuff in order to vote, you know, instead of to register. And I think that needs to be stopped as far as, I mean, I've had a lot of women say to me, well, we're going to have our marriage license when we go in there to vote. And that's not how I understand it.
Yeah, it's a lie. It's a lie. We can call it a lie, right? We don't even have to call it misinformation. We can call it a lie. So a few things about that. So first of all, this is all tied to this SAVE Act that people hear about in the Congress, right? Just as a general rule, when people use cutesy little acronyms like that, usually a big flashing red light that this is a bad thing, right? Very much the case here. Keep in mind, this law has not passed, right? It passed the House. It has not passed the Senate. It is being filibustered in the Senate, so it will not pass there. So the president has issued one of his tweets, whatever they are, right? Like one of his streams of consciousness about them, declaring that folks should do this. He has no power to do that. No one is obligated to follow that instruction. And for the most part, states, including ones that have Republican secretaries of state, have said, no, we're not going to do that. You don't have the legal power to do that. We're not going to do it until the law tells us to. So that's one part of it. He issued an executive order last year that tried to do this already. That executive order was challenged in court by a little group called the ACLU. Maybe you've heard of them. We won a ruling from the courts that said that the executive order couldn't be implemented. The executive order, mind you, is just a memo, right? It's just a memo. It's just a memo. It doesn't supersede the Constitution or the law or values or anything else. An executive order is just a little funky memo, so nobody really has to pay attention to it. All of that, but the thing I really want to say is let us keep in mind that we here in Kansas have experience with this thing. Because when the Papers, Please documentary proof of citizenship requirement was in place here in Kansas, which we challenged in court, At one point, it was blocking 1 in 5 voter registrations in the state, 1 in 5 eligible voter registrations. One of its components was that married women had to oftentimes produce a marriage certificate in order to be able to vote. Well, guess what? We challenged that in court. It took several years, but we won a federal court ruling from a George W. Bush appointee that said that this was not only illegal under the National Voter Registration Act, but also unconstitutional under the federal Constitution. And that means that we have a permanent injunction in the state of Kansas that prevents something like that from being implemented here. So even if Donald Trump were to somehow have his little temper tantrum granted, even if this bill were to pass, we have a tool here in Kansas that protects people, and you should know that, and you should tell everyone you know. We've been there, seen that, have the t-shirt, and we don't have to go there anymore.
One last chance. Anybody else?
She remembered her question. I knew she would.
This is about voter registration drives. And I read an article about the 22 bills as you were talking about, but it was very superficial. And it seems to me that I remembered that it said that you can no longer register online. So that means that the QR code that we always take with us to voter registration drives will no longer be any good. That particular bill passed.
So this particular bill that you're talking doesn't get rid of online voter registration, period. What it says is that independent voter registration sites online cannot work anymore. The only online registration that can happen is the one that is operated by the state government of Kansas, essentially. So yes, in most cases, the QR codes that you're talking about, yes, those would not work anymore, but it's not that we're getting rid of online registration entirely. It is instead a very surgical, targeted attempt to end voter registration drives by independent organizations. It is designed to make it more difficult for those groups to do it. And because everything is historical, right? Let us always remember that everything has a history, everything has a context. Nothing these people do is just plucked from the ether, right? It's all for a reason. The reason they want that is because historically, the Kansas state voter registration site was more restrictive than the ones operated by independent groups. Independent groups used the federal voter registration form that did not ask about some things that folks don't want to fill out, whereas the Kansas online voter registration form did. And that is why those independent sites became more popular, became used more often, because they didn't have documentary proof of citizenship, for example, whereas the state site did. So long as the federal form is controlled by the federal Constitution and by federal laws, it is always going to be more flexible, whereas the state-operated one is going to be at the whim of the Secretary of State. That's why the person who is running for Secretary of State is the one who introduced the bill, right? It sounds like another one of these technical, argle-bargle, jargony things that doesn't really matter, but what it's really about is centralizing power. What it's really about is creeping authoritarianism. What it's really about is depriving voting rights. The good news about that, that's another thing that can go to the Kansas State Supreme Court for review. I wonder if the Kansas State Supreme Court is important. What are we going to do? Are we going to win on this amendment? Yes. Are we going to win on this amendment? Yes. All right. I want to hear you, and I want to think you really believe it. We're going to try one more time. Are we going to win on this amendment? Yes. Thank you very much. Judge Becker.